Cannabis is legal in the United States of America, in 38 states for medicinal use, and 24 states for recreational. In certain states, it can even be delivered to your door via an app like Uber Eats, but you must pay cash. In Europe, 4 countries have legalized weed: Germany, Luxembourg, Georgia, and Malta. That's right. You didn't hear me say the Netherlands, and that's because it's decriminalized there, so technically not legal. The rest of the world, it's legal in a smattering of countries as well as decriminalized in a few others. But legal or not, it has been in use for a very long time. As a matter of fact, the very first documented case was in 2800 BC in Shenyang's pharmacopoeia. Throughout the ages and the world, cannabis has been used and documented as a therapeutic agent, with experts suggesting that over 700 strains exist today. But even with all of that history, it wasn't until 1988 that the first cannabinoid receptor was discovered, paving the way for more information on just how this stinky little flower affects our bodies. Welcome to the Journal of Nuclear Medicine Technology podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Settle. I'm joined today by Mary Beth Farrell, who co-authored the article in the March 2024 issue of the Journal of Nuclear Medicine Technology called "Got the Munchies for an Egg Sandwich? The Effects of Cannabis on Bowel Motility and Beyond." Thank you for joining me today, Mary Beth. It's really good to see you. So I hear you have some interesting facts on cannabis. Care to share some?
I will, but I first of all want to say I am no expert. I am not cool enough to be an expert on the effects of reefer, ganja, Mary Jane, all of that stuff. What I am is I'm scientific, and so I wrote this article with Dr. Rutger Gunther, who is cool, but I don't know how cool he is. But yeah, we looked up a lot of facts, and one of the things that surprised me, like there were lots of things that surprised me, but the first thing that really surprised me is that the CDC says that in the United States, 50% of adults have tried marijuana. That one was surprising to me. I wouldn't have thought that. And that 17% are chronic users of it. And as you said, there's so many states where it's legal now, it's ubiquitous. And I think that's probably the biggest point of the article. Some other interesting facts that I thought were just kind of, 53% of men have tried marijuana, only 44% of women. And then it didn't matter if you were educated or college graduates or non-college graduates, it's the same. 49% of both have tried it. So there's no patterns there.
Wow, that is really some interesting facts. Thank you for sharing those. So you say that you're not an expert, but you have written this article, and I guarantee because you've done the research for it, you know quite a bit more than some of the rest of us. So can you go into a little bit about the different types of cannabis and how they affect the body?
Absolutely. And like I said, I had to learn all of this. And so there are what are called phytocannabinoids. And that's the ones that you think about. That's the one that, that you roll up and you have your joint or your blunt. Look at me throwing all these words out. But the phytocannabinoids, there are 3 types. There's sativa. And sativa is the one that gets you all excited. It's stimulating. If you want to think of sativa, stimulating together. The next phytocannabinoid is indica. And indica has the nickname of in the couch. And so that's the one that a lot of people take to sleep. And then there's ruderalis that has a very low concentration of THC. And so most people aren't taking that. And then there's hemp. And all right, I've always thought of hemp. And when I think of hemp, I think of, people doing, macrame and hippies. But actually hemp is used a lot in industrial products, whether it's makeup, textiles, home furnishings, clothing. So there is that. So there is the 3 types of phytocannabinoids, and then there are endocannabinoids that our body makes. And that was a big surprise to me too, that our body makes endocannabinoids.
Interesting. So when you talk about these endocannabinoids, what is it that they do?
The endocannabinoids, our whole body has an endocannabinoid system. And as you said, the first receptors were discovered in 1988, but they found that this whole endocannabinoid system, it has the effects on your brain. It regulates a lot of the bodily functions. And then you hear a lot now about the gut microbiome, and that they think is, they're calling it the second brain. The endocannabinoids are very, very important and active in the endocannabinoid system. And when I went to school, there was the pulmonary system, the skeletal system. There wasn't an endocannabinoid system.
That's fair. I don't think I learned about it either when I went to school. And so I guess since you're talking about the cannabinoid receptors, there's two of them, right? So can you go a little bit into that?
There are. So, but before I kind of get to that, I mentioned it briefly. So the effects of marijuana are there is the THC, and that's the one that has the psychedelic and the one that gives you the euphoria. And then there is the CBD, which is cannabidiol. And the cannabidiol, the CBD, is actually the one that has, they think, a lot of effects on the inflammatory system. And so from there, you have those two effects and the different effects in the system, and then they're in the endocannabinoid system. It's not easy to say all these words. In the endocannabinoid system, there are two primary receptors to which the THC and the CBD work on. There's C1s and C2s are the two receptors. And let's not forget that there are synthetic marijuana products or cannabinoids that I wasn't aware of, that there are actually pharmaceuticals that are made that there's a brand called Drobanol, I think Marinol is the brand name for it, and that's used for chemotherapy patients or anorectic patients for nausea and vomiting. And then there's another version of it called Epidiolex, which is actually what's used for intractable seizures. So there are sold, pharmaceuticals that are sold. And then there are neosynthetic or cannabinoids, which these are the ones that are kind of the street drugs, K2 and spice nuts. And I've been out buying them out on the street. I just want to clarify that. But they were big in the early 2000s. And the beauty of them, it depends, I guess, on your perspective, is that they are undetectable in drug tests, is why they were attractive, and they had a really high potency. All right, so we're through the types of weed. We've gotten into the weeds with weed, and now we're down to the receptors.
Got it. Okay, good. So let's get into the receptors.
All right, so there is the CB1s that I talked about. And CB1s, first of all, I should say you have these receptors all over your body. And CB1s affect your motor activity, your appetite, your coordination. CB2s, as I said, are a lot of the inflammatory stuff, and they're in your gut and your pancreas, your liver, your skeleton, any of those places. So we have these receptors all over our body, and based off of what they do is the effect that it has on the body.
Okay, so you mentioned in the CB1 that affects your appetite. So that's going to lead me to my next question. And the name of your article literally has my next question in it. Why, if someone is taking cannabis, do they get the munchies?
All right, that is the THC and the CB1 receptors, the psychoactive effects that work on your central nervous system. So that is it. The psychoactive effects are, some people get euphoria, some people get paranoid, but it does increase your appetite, and it lowers inhibition. So you want to eat and eat more. There are some other effects, though, of the CB1s that are peripherally, not in the central nervous system. And they are the effects of, they tighten the esophageal sphincter. So that amazed me, because they think that perhaps that there might be a role for marijuana to actually have an effect with gastroesophageal reflux. They're investigating that now. We know that the CB1/2 decreases gastric motility. We also know that or gastric emptying, but it also slows motility through the bowel and the intestine. That's kind of an important part. I was kind of lumping gastric emptying and bowel emptying in the same bucket, and they aren't. They kind of have some different mechanisms. And then the last effect of the CB1s is that it actually decreases the vasomotor sensation in the bowel. So I guess the answer to the question is, so you have the marijuana that affects the central nervous system, gives you the munchies, and why you can eat an entire bag of Doritos or 3 or 4 of them is because of also the effects in the peripheral nervous system, that you don't have the sensation that you're full. So you just keep eating bags and bags of Doritos.
That's interesting, because as I learned in the article that you wrote, it actually can slow down gut motility. So still being hungry and having slower gut motility, I think that leads into my question of what does that mean for nuclear medicine and gastric emptying scans?
That is a problem. And so, as I said, it's ubiquitous now. And unfortunately, there's a lot of research. That's the good news. A lot of research on marijuana right now. But what there isn't is any good studies on the effects of marijuana on gastric emptying scintigraphy. So we really don't know if these patients have slower or better. There were a couple of studies. They were not standardized. They were done well before the guidelines came out. They were small numbers of people. So we really don't have a great idea on that. But the good news is there's lots of research going on. So for gastric motility, the belief is that actually we need to pay attention to it, but we're not 100% sure right now. And I can say that the Society of Nuclear Medicine is in the process of rewriting the gastrointestinal or the gastric emptying standards and the guidelines. And so I have a feeling that new research is going to change some of the things and what we know about it.
It does sound like more research needs to happen here. So what would you recommend at the moment, again, not being the expert, but doing this research that you've done so far, what would you recommend at the moment for the nuclear medicine technologist?
Several things. Technologists need to be aware that there are effects on gastric motility and we know effects on bowel and small bowel and colon motility. So you need to be aware of that. Second of all, any of the drugs that we give or that when we do gastric emptying studies, we don't let them take opiates. We don't let them take motility drugs. The rule is to withhold these drugs for 4 half-lives. And so the blood half-life of marijuana is 4 hours. So kind of a good general recommendation is no pot after midnight. And the other problem with this is the effects are different whether they smoke it or whether they eat an edible, eat some gummies. And then if you're a chronic user, the effects are less than if you're an occasional user. And so the best recommendations now are to withhold marijuana. We say to withhold cigarettes before these studies. So just add that into it. But very importantly, we need to know, it needs to be on the history and the physicians need to know it. And the reason for that is that for gastroparesis is incomplete emptying of your stomach for some reason. Delayed gastric emptying is one of the clinical markers for gastroparesis. And there was one study where they looked at about, I don't remember how many people, but about 12% of them were people with gastroparesis were actually were chronic marijuana users. And they didn't find any differences in effects in terms of gastric emptying in these users. But what they found is interestingly enough, is that although it affects gastric motility, all of the people who were in this study felt that their symptoms were better and that their gastroparesis was better when they were smoking. So what should nuclear techs do? Put it in your recommendations, just like any other drug, 4 half-lives. Make sure that you're screening for it. Make sure that physicians know about it, because if you have a study that's normal and somebody is a chronic user of marijuana, then we're not going to know whether that. Wait a minute, let me going to say that correctly. If they are chronic users, if they have a normal study, then we know it's not gastroparesis. But if they have gastroparesis and they're a chronic user, we don't know whether they have gastroparesis or if it's effect of the marijuana. So the idea is possibly that you do them in their normal state of being a chronic user and then get them off of it for at least 72 hours and then repeat the study. So those are the recommendations for nuclear techs. And it took me a long time to say it.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Mary Beth. So if I learned anything today, it's that a lot more research definitely needs to be done in this arena. Actually, as of this recording, in the US alone, there are 333 research studies currently recruiting that involve cannabis and another 81 active studies ongoing. So perhaps we will get more answers soon. And remember earlier how I mentioned where cannabis is legal? Let me leave you with this other little bit of information. So if you're traveling to Asia, there's quite a few countries where you won't want to take part in any use or possession of any drug, including cannabis, because it's punishable by death. Thank you very much for joining me today, and thank you very much to our guest, Mary Beth Farrell. I'm Jessica Settle, and this was the Journal of Nuclear Medicine Technology podcast.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.